Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 9, Episode 15, The Wizard. Hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I am bracing for some real cold temperatures here in Colorado. It's supposed to get down to negative temps, not supposed to get out of the single digits for like 4 days here. So not looking forward to that. I'm a soft Coloradan now with weather. It's pretty mild here. Contrary to popular belief, if you're not up in the mountains in Colorado, you are in a pretty mild, temperate environment. I mean, it still gets all the seasons, but with winter especially, even if we get snow, it's usually gone within a day or two. So much sun. It's just a lot milder than my childhood experience in Michigan, which is that frigid lake effect cold, like bone-chilling cold. So yeah, I'm not looking forward to 4 days of this really cold weather. I'm supposed to take my son to his basketball games on Sunday morning, which is going to be the height of the cold. And I'm really hoping they call it. I really don't want to go out in this weather. I want to just be inside and be cozy, have some hot chocolate, sit by the fire. That's all I want to do when it's really cold outside, but we shall see. I will be prepared either way. Okay, let's get into this episode. The synopsis for The Wizard is as follows. Jerry buys a Wizard electronic organizer for his father, which he only uses to calculate tips. Elaine dates a guy who may or may not be African American. After accomplishing everything he set out to do, Kramer retires to Florida. George lies and tells Susan's parents that he has a house in the Hamptons, then is forced to prove it to them. This episode was written by Steve Lookner. Oh, I wonder if he's related to Beth Lookner. We start out in Monk's. Jerry and George are at a booth. George is very bored by the news about China in the paper, and Jerry tells George about this organizer that he's holding in his hand. He's going to give it to his dad when he goes down there to Florida for his birthday. He says it costs $200, but he's going to tell his dad it costs $50. And if he says it's hot, that's his favorite. He just cares more about the deal. George says he got a message from the Rosses, his dead fiance's parents, and that he hasn't spoken to them since the funeral. George has always suspected that they've blamed him for Susan's death. Why? Because you picked out the poisoned envelopes? That's silly. Elaine approaches and is less than enthused to introduce her boyfriend Daryl to George and Jerry. She introduces them as people I know. Daryl says hi, but then he has to run and exit. Still no putty, Jerry asks, and she says, I think his answering machine's broken, so I just gave up. So, what do you think? She asks. What about you dating a black guy? What's the big deal? Elaine is confused. What black guy? Jerry thinks Daryl is black. George says he thought he looked Irish. What's his last name? Nelson. Well, that's not Irish. George is also really iffy on whether or not they should be talking about this. Elaine thinks it's okay, and he's like, no, it isn't, because Daryl isn't there with them. Elaine stresses that it really doesn't matter if he's black or white, but that she'd just like to know. Oh, so you need to know, Jerry says. No, I don't need to know. It'd just be nice if I knew. A waitress comes to the table offering to take the check, and she's a black waitress, and the guilt of their conversation causes Jerry, George, and Elaine to put down a bunch more money as her tip. The actress here who plays the waitress is Bonnie Turpin, and she has quite the resume. She's also appeared in Cold Case, ER, NCIS, among many other shows. She's also a sought-after audiobook narrator with hundreds of titles under her belt, and she's also a certified yoga instructor. Bonnie Turpin has sort of had my dream career, just like act in so many different shows, be an audiobook narrator, and do yoga also. I mean, Bonnie's got it made. I really like her. I think she does a great job as this waitress. And later when she gets the blow line of, I'll give you a couple seconds to decide. Oh, so delicious. What a fun role. And she really gives a great performance. All right, my take on the scene. The first scene of the episode, we get Elaine's plot out. Her approach to the guys always gets me. I mean, she's just not in the mood because I think we've seen it before where she's very excited to introduce Jerry and George and even Kramer to a guy that she's seeing, but Man, yeah, she really wasn't in the mood this time, but it's like also, Elaine, maybe don't go to the coffee shop where Jerry and George practically live. But anyway, the people, I know, very well done. So here we are. Once again, Seinfeld takes on an issue or a pretty awkward topic and manages to make it funny. And the reason they're successful at that is because the butt of the humor, in this case, it's not about Black people. It's not Daryl. It's really the commentary on the human tendency to need to define someone for our own comfort. I mean, we all do it. I don't care who you are. I don't see color. It's like bullshit. Yeah, you do. You shouldn't ignore color, by the way. But this is something, that this show does from time to time. But once they've established that the humor is not punching down to whatever community or topic or whatever the sort of risky thing about the issue, it's not punching down to that. And it's really about these four idiots and their attitudes. That's why it's successful. And it's still not easy to do, even when they have that focus, correctly. They have the lens pointed the right way. It still takes some pretty fantastic writing to pull that off. I do like that it's George that calls out their conversation. Like, maybe we shouldn't be talking about this. We shouldn't be talking about Daryl's race without him present. I mean, he does have these moments of being socially conscious. It's very nice sometimes that George is the one that gets that. Now, I don't want to harp on this very much, but I totally understand Elaine not caring if he's Black, but just wanting to know. And as a person of color myself, I'm an Indian woman, for those of you who might not be aware. Also, I'm an Indian woman who happens to have lighter eyes and fairer skin, and I don't have an accent. I don't have a typical Indian accent. So because of all of those factors, I have been the subject of a lot of "what are you?" questions throughout my life. And from my experience and tolerance level, it really depends on the tone of the person who's asking this. Now, most of the time, people don't mean it to be malicious, but at the same time, no matter who you are, no matter what your intention is, when you ask that question, it does sort of expose that person as seeing your skin color above everything else. And being that I've had that experience, I'm very deliberate to never bring up my curiosity about someone's race or nationality in a conversation with them. But look, I'm human. It doesn't mean that I don't have a curiosity about it, especially if it's ambiguous. I think it's human nature. There's nothing wrong with wondering. But at the same time, it's like, there's a tact to it. And I think that's really what this episode tackles. It tackles the tact. I am so glad that it's Elaine with this plot. I think that, again, they've given her something with a lot of meat to it and ultimately a lot of comedy. Also, and I have to say this, I was always bothered by the casting choice here of Daryl. Now, I looked it up. Now, he's 11 years younger than JLD, which is totally fine. I am not being ageist. Don't come at me, especially considering how the guys on this show date women decades younger than they are. I mean, on and off screen, right, Jerry? We'll just move that aside. I mean, Michael Richards dating Sarah Silverman in the show? Come on. But my issue with that is like Daryl seriously looks like he's 17. This actor looks like he's 17. It looks like the suits don't even fit him. It's like he's wearing his like big brother or his dad's suit. And I don't know. I just don't see them as a couple very easily. Just JLD and this actor, like it doesn't mesh to me. He just doesn't seem like a good match. That's not to say I don't like his performance. I actually think his performance is excellent. And I have a little treat for all of you. You have to stay tuned, but after the commercial break, I have quite a lot of information about this actor. So stay tuned. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. George is calling the Rosses, and Mrs. Ross is like, "Who?" "I'm George. I was Susan's friend." She asks him if he can participate in an event they're having for the Susan Ross Foundation that weekend. And true to form, George lies and says he just leased a house in the Hamptons and he needs to get out there and sign the papers. "Oh, thanks for calling, George," she says, and George fumbles with his goodbye. "Yeah, after all, you were almost my, okay, bye." He gets off the phone and Jerry's like, "Oh, house in the Hamptons. Well, I've been lying about my income for years, so I figured I could afford a house in the Hamptons. Kramer enters with celebration cigars. He tells the guys his coffee table book was just optioned to be a movie, and they are paying him enough to retire. Jerry's like, retire from what? From the grind. I mean, who needs it? Kramer says how he's accomplished everything he set out to do, and now it's time to enjoy his life. And he even bought himself a retirement gift. It's a gold watch. Ooh, it's not really gold. Oh, it's a funny moment. All right, next we're in Daryl's apartment. Elaine approaches his door and hears some loud hip hop music. And she's like, okay, he is black. Of course, he's listening to hip hop. Oh, goodness. She knocks on his door in rhythm with the music, I want to mention. He answers it and she says, hey, great music. Oh, it turns out it's not his, but his neighbor's, and he hates it. He pounds on the wall and yells for them to turn it down. So Elaine is back to being confused. He doesn't like hip hop. Maybe he's not black. Then she spots his tribal artwork and she asks if they have any cultural significance. And then Daryl answers like a total dick. He says, they're African. Right, African. Well, he says not African. He specifies they're South African. Yeah, my family used to live there, but we got out for obvious reasons. You know how it is. Maybe. My take on this scene, we've got Detective Elaine here trying to figure out if Daryl is black or white. And it's so well written to keep it confusing. I love that relief she shows in the hallway, just nodding. Okay, she hears the music. But then she's back to complete doubt when it's the neighbor's music. And then the artwork being South African doesn't make anything clearer. Again, she's the one showing, okay, these stereotypes, this is what I'm going to base everything on. So I like that. I like how they present it as just believing stereotypes, making assumptions. It's really well written, really well done. And back to that dickish response of they're African. I fucking hate it. It's always bugged me. But anyway, this is a great scene overall. And Elaine is no closer to understanding Daryl's ethnicity. All right, next we're on the street. George is chatting with FDR at his hot dog stand. The Rosses walk by all dressed up for that Susan Ross Foundation event. And they see George. And this is when he's supposed to be in the Hamptons. So they're kind of confused. Finally, FDR's like, are you going to buy a hot dog or not? No, George says. Next, we're in Florida. The Seinfelds are up at 5:30 a.m. making all sorts of noise, waking Jerry up from, well, what we assume is his terrible sleep on the bad couch. Well, he's up, so he gives his dad the Wizard for his birthday. Now, Morty, after looking at the Wizard, he's mostly excited that he can figure out the tip at restaurants. Even though Jerry's like, no, there's a lot of other functions. And then Kramer enters. When'd you get in, buddy? Jerry is so confused about what he's doing there. He's like, well, I told you I retired and moved in next door. Kramer, you can't live here. This is where people go to die. The Seinfelds look at Jerry. Well, not you, older people. Helen does not like that Kramer's eating cookies for breakfast. She's like, I'll fix you something. How about a feta cheese omelet? Oh, that sounds great, Mom. And Jerry warns, if you feed him, he'll never leave. Oh, I don't have feta. How about cottage cheese and egg beaters? Ugh, I guess. Jerry's still in disbelief. I can't believe you live here. Don't I look more relaxed? Then we get our first montage of Kramer living it up at Del Boca Vista, playing ping pong, dancing with all the ladies, and comforting folks as an ambulance takes away a dead resident. Next, we're at Monk's. We have a Benestanza booth going, Elaine and George. Elaine wants to know George's thoughts on the Daryl situation. And he's like, well, why don't you just ask him? Because if I ask him, then it's like, I really want to know. She kind of gives this motion like, duh, idiot. George suggests that maybe he's mixed. Is that the right word? Oh, I really don't think we should be talking about this. Anyway, George gets up to go to the bathroom and Elaine's like, you know what? I'm going to leave anyway. I'll just talk to Jerry when he gets home. As Elaine's putting on her coat, the Rosses enter and she greets them. Oh, you're George's friend. Mr. Ross mentions how they saw him in the city. What happened to his place in the Hamptons? Elaine is shocked. The Hamptons? She starts laughing. George Costanza? I don't think so. And laughs out the door. George returns from the crapper and sees the Rosses. "Oh, George, we were just talking about you." George apologizes for missing that charity thing, but, it was just one of those glorious Hamptons weekends. "Really?" they say. "Yeah, I may move out there." They just kind of nod. "I made it. I'll do it." "All right. See you later. Keep it real." All right, my take. We're so blessed with a Benestanza scene. They're definitely each other's backups when Jerry's out of town, so this makes sense. Elaine immediately getting annoyed with George. I mean, so on brand, right? But his advice is bad. She can't just ask him, you dumbass. I can never get enough of the way Jason Alexander says mixed with like his hands twisting. Like he's kneading dough in front of him. It's so brilliant. And then Elaine's reaction, is that the right word? And once again, George is too uncomfortable with this conversation. I really like how he just cuts it off. He's like, "You know what? Let's just stop this. We shouldn't be talking about this." The conversation Elaine has with the Rosses, that does not disappoint. We get the sheer master with laugh acting at work here. JLD is one of the best. Again, I've said this before. That is not an easy thing to pull off as an actor, but she has got it down. If JLD ever does one of those masterclass things, which maybe she has, I don't know. I don't keep up with that. I feel like part of it should be laugh acting. She's one of the best I've ever seen. That first reaction when they ask about his place in the Hamptons, that sort of amused shock, it's just perfect. And then the continued laugh, because you could just tell she just keeps thinking about George having a house in the Hamptons. Like, come on. And the way she just laughs out of Monks, it really makes this whole scene sing. All right, next we are in the Del Boca Vista restaurant. They've all finished their meal and Morty is excited to use his tip calculator. Jerry's like, "Dad, it does a lot of other things, lots of other functions. Morty can't even get it open." So Jerry opens it for him and gets a nice little encouraging cheer from Mom. "Yay, Jerry got it open." I love that moment so much. I do that around the house sometimes when like anyone does something so easy. I'm like, "Yay, blah, 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 got it open." Anyway, Helen thanks Jerry for coming for Morty's birthday. It takes his mind off the condo election. Oh, right. Jerry remembers he can't run because he was impeached at his other condo place. Morty insists that he wasn't impeached. "I resigned." Besides, the press would bury him, Helen says. What press? The condo newsletter, the Boca Breeze. Kramer walks in with a couple older men, and they tell Morty how his charisma got him a date with that young aquasize instructor. She's 50. They walk away, and Morty stands up with an excited look on his face. Kramer's like, "Oh, what are you looking at?" "The next condo board president of Del Boca Vista, Phase 3. Next, we're at Daryl's apartment. Elaine has given him the wizard as a gift, and he's trying to look at all the functions. He's really excited about it, but she brushes that aside and says that they need to immediately fill out the warranty card. She starts filling out his name, his interests, a bunch of things he doesn't do. And then she's like, "Oh, here's one. Race. Isn't that optional?" he asks. "Well, it should be. It's nobody's damn business," she says. "But they would really like to know." Asian. "What?" "Just to mess with them." "Oh, good one." And then Daryl sees the choices for income and he tells her to check over $100,000. She looks at him kind of surprised. "Really? Does that matter?" "No, but it's very nice to know." My take, Detective Elaine here, giving it another go. I like that they bring the wizard into Elaine's plot. Nice little dovetailing here of a couple of the plots for the episode. And that exchange when they get to the race section of the card. Nobody's damn business, but they'd really like to know. I love the change in emotion there. JLD does it so well. And then that reaction to when he messes with her and says Asian. Another kind of laugh acting here, fake laugh acting, which is definitely easier because all acting like you're laughing is fake. So you can do that really easily for obvious reasons. I mean, it's very similar to her laughing at the stationery store guy. Then And $100,000 in 1998, he really was making bank. Daryl, I don't know what he does. Maybe that's why he has the snazzy suits that are way too big for him. I like her very nice to know and huge smile at the end. And we can't forget, we cannot blame her. She just dated the Green Lantern, who's poor and married. So I don't mind that she's enjoying a guy who makes a lot of money. All right, next we are in Florida and Jerry's apartment. Jerry's on the phone with Elaine, and she tells him how she's given up on figuring out Daryl's, and just taking him to a bunch of Spanish restaurants. I figured that'll cover us either way. You're a master at race relations, Jerry says. Meanwhile, Kramer is doing his usual thing, but at the Seinfeld, he's grabbing food from their kitchen and a magazine. Elaine can't believe Kramer is running for president of the condo. Jerry explains how it's a puppet regime with Kramer being the face and his father pulling the strings from behind. Who are they running against? Elaine wants to know. Common sense and a guy in a wheelchair. Such a great line. George enters Jerry's place and he's surprised to see Elaine there. He asks, "What are you doing here?" And Jerry tries to stop her, but she just blurts out, "Oh, I'm getting his mail." "Oh no," Jerry says. George is so hurt by this. He grabs the phone. "Why is Elaine getting your mail?" And Jerry gives him some bullshit job of flushing the toilet a couple times a day to exorcise the gaskets. It's much more important than the mail. George says he will do it proudly, and he hangs up. So, he tells Elaine he ran into the Rosses. "Oh, right, at the coffee shop." She asks him, "Where did they get the idea that you have a place in the Hamptons?" He looks at her. "From me?" "What did you say?" "I told him I had a place in the Hamptons." "What did you say?" "I told them." "You didn't." And I laughed and I laughed. George is appalled that they knew he was lying and says that you just don't let someone go on if you know they're lying. You call them a liar. And Elaine sees the perfect opportunity. So she says, "Like, you're a liar." And he's like, "Yes, thank you. Was that so difficult?" So this is over, not over. Elaine's guessing not over. George gets a scheming look on his face and he says he's going to invite them to his fake house in the Hamptons. Then we'll see who blinks first. Elaine says, "Haven't you done enough to these people? It's not about them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to exercise Jerry's gaskets." And Elaine kind of goes, "Ooh," like she cares. My take, here we find out Elaine's strategy to cover her possible interracial relationship. Again, just showing the bumbling nature of a well-intentioned person. But yeah, what the fuck? Spanish restaurants? I don't get it. And of course, Jerry calls her out on her bizarre tactic. I love that line so much. A master at race relations. This conversation between Elaine and Jerry, it's very grounded. I like it. She's genuinely interested in what Kramer's doing, and they're just catching up. I really think it's a nice, charming little conversation. And I feel like we're getting spoiled here. We get another Benestanza moment. Oh, and I also love the silliness between Jerry and George. George, such a sensitive friend, offended by the demotion of toilet flushing, but I think Jerry does a good job pumping him up. Even if George doesn't believe him, I think he just appreciates Jerry's attempt at being like, no, these gaskets, George, they're way more important. The exchange about the Hamptons and the Rosses, I laughed and I laughed. I have quoted that so many times. I've actually done it on this pod. Whenever I've talked about how funny I find things, I say I laughed and I laughed. It's such a fun sing-songy way to describe something amusing. And I feel like Elaine is playing the role of the audience there when she says to George, "Haven't you done enough to these people?" It's so true. It's like, George, just let it go, okay? I mean, you pretty much killed their daughter, so just shut the fuck up. And I love the button to the scene. It's so childish. I gotta go exercise Jerry's gaskets. And then Elaine's like, "Ooh." Perfect. And this is why we love Benestanza. All right, next we're in Florida. Kramer is in full campaign mode, shaking hands in the dining room, asking for people's votes. An old lady asks if he would cut her meat, and he happily obliges. We get another montage. Boca Breeze headlines are all positive for Kramer, but if you did notice in the lower right-hand corner, there was a series of Larry David articles. First one says that he played golf really well. Second one said he hurt his shoulder. Third one said he'll never play golf again. So a little nod to Larry David. It was cute. Anyway, the Boca Breeze headlines are interspersed with Kramer doing some hands-on campaigning, tickling babies and old men in a wheelchair, and putting a Vote Kramer sticker on an ambulance. Oh, it's so funny. The actress here who plays the old woman is Jeanette Miller. She had an over 55-year career in Hollywood before she passed away in 2016 at the age of 84. She also played the lurker in Friends, who gets into it with Phoebe in the Vegas episode. I thought a lot of you would appreciate that. Also appeared in My Name is Earl and The Middle. I think she's adorable. There's not much else to it. I love Jeanette. Okay, next we're in Monks. Elaine and Daryl are at a booth. A waitress comes and takes their coffee order, and she asks Daryl, "Are you black?" Elaine's kind of like, what the hell? But then she clarifies with her next question, "Or should I bring some cream?" And Daryl responds, "I'm black. You know what? Bring a little cream." The waitress walks away, and this older guy sort of mutters something as he walks by their table. And Daryl gets so mad. "Did you hear that? There's still people who have problems with an interracial couple." Well, this perks Elaine right up. She says, "Interracial? Us? Isn't that unbelievable?" Elaine says, "Yes, it's awful. They're upset because we're an interracial couple." "That's racism," Elaine says joyfully. Daryl is so upset he can't even eat. "Yeah, me neither," Elaine says. "Well, maybe this turkey club." The actress in this scene who plays the waitress is Constance Zimmer, and she probably looks pretty familiar to a lot of you. She went on to have quite a successful career after this appearance, with roles on Entourage, House of Cards, and The Newsroom. She is a favorite of mine. I love her raspy voice, her on-screen presence. She's sort of like gritty, but she's also beautiful, and she's just like she's just badass. She just has a really badass screen presence. And I really enjoy her. My take on the scene, Elaine's reaction to what she thinks is finally an answer to what she's been wondering. I mean, the performance showing that juxtaposition of sheer joy while she's also saying how appalled she is as well, just like Daryl. I always enjoy the delivery of "That's racism," expressing total disgust with her mouth while her face is just pure glee. I mean, that look on her face, like she's so excited. Such a top-notch performance. We all feel her relief and understand why she's so excited while trying to sympathize with Daryl's anger. It's really, really well done. Again, very well written. All right, next we are on the street. George is picking up the Rosses to take them to his house in the Hamptons, house in quotation marks. So they start getting in the car, and George says, "It's a 2-hour drive. Once you get in that car, we are going all the way to the Hamptons." Well, the Rosses get in without hesitation. George takes it in for a second and says, "All right, you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts." I can't do it, but I love the way Jason Alexander says it. Next, we're in Florida. Kramer is still campaigning, but Helen arrives to show them the latest Boca Breeze. There's an expose about Kramer being barefoot in the clubhouse. He says, "Well, I couldn't find my shoes." Oh no, now they need some damage control for this scandal. And Kramer gets the idea to give the wizards to every member of the condo board. Jerry's like, "Kramer!" All right, there are 20 members. Morty is glad that Jerry can get that deal. Kramer wants to start planning, but first, Morty needs a nap with his electric blanket. Helen and Morty exit. Jerry tells Kramer he can't get that many wizards. They're really $200 a pop. He lied about them being hot. "Don't worry," Kramer says. "I know a guy." "Here?" "Yeah, Bob Sacamaro's father." All right, next we're in George's car. The Rosses are in the back seat as George drives and lies about his amazing Hamptons house. And they're totally playing along, not backing down at all. Mrs. Ross goes so far as having them stop at an antique stand. "We'll buy you a housewarming gift." That giggle, oh my God, such a great performance. George says, "All right, we're taking it up a notch." All right, next we're in Monks. Elaine makes small talk with the black waitress from earlier. I wish she had a name. I don't want to call her the black waitress, but there's no name in the credits. Elaine can tell she's tired. She asks her, "Long day?" "Yeah, I just worked a triple shift." "I hear you, sister," Elaine says. The waitress is a bit confused. "Sister?" "Yeah, it's okay. My boyfriend's black. See, here he is." Daryl sits down and the waitress looks at him. "He's black?" And then he asks, "I'm black? Aren't you?" The waitress says, "I'll give you a couple minutes to decide," and exits. Daryl is so confused, and Elaine says, no, you're black. You said we were an interracial couple. Daryl's like, well, yeah, because you're Hispanic. I am? Aren't you? No, why would you think that? So Daryl's reasons for thinking Elaine is Hispanic is her last name is Benez, her hair, and you kept taking me to those Spanish restaurants. Well, that's because I thought you were black. Why would you take me to Spanish restaurants because I'm black? Having no good answer to this, Elaine goes, I don't think we should be talking about this. So they both figure out that they're just a couple of white people. And you can see the disappointment on both of their faces. But Elaine breaks that with a simple question. You want to go to the Gap? Sure. And they get up and leave. My take, such a strong scene. Great way to resolve this story for Elaine. And such a cringe moment at the beginning with saying sister. It's like, come on, Elaine, come on. That is so awful. But again, it blows up in her face as it should. And good on that waitress for calling her out. Like, what the fuck are you doing? This is a very satisfying resolution to Elaine's plot for a few reasons. Daryl questions the whole Spanish restaurant thing because I think we're all wondering what does that even mean? And we find out that he's white. And the Gap line. I mean, there's so many great things about this scene. I do remember literally laughing out loud the first time I saw that. It is such great writing and great performances all around. All right, next we're in Florida. Kramer enters the restaurant. He just finished handing out all the wizards on election day. He and Morty think they have it in the bag until a bunch of the residents pipe up about their wizards not calculating the right tips. And Morty sees that they're not wizards, they're Willards. Oh, Sacramento Senior screwed me, Jerry says. Morty asks Jerry, why didn't you get the real ones? Because they're $200. So there's no deal? No, not hot. Well, that mistake costs Kramer the election, so he's going back to New York. Jerry apologizes, and Morty is so mad. You should be sorry. How could you spend $200 on a tip calculator? It does other things, Jerry says. The tag to the episode is, on Long Island. George and the Rosses are getting out of the car. They're on the shore, and they're wondering where his house is. He says, well, we have to go the rest of the way on foot. All right, they're ready to go. But George breaks. He says, there's no house. It's a lie. And they say, we know. Then why? George is pleading with them. Why did you make me come all the way out here? They tell him, we don't like you, and we've always blamed you for what happened to Susan. Oh, all right, they say, let's head back. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Whether it's an apartment, condo, dorm room, or your mom's basement, sharing walls with other people can be difficult, especially if you're not comfortable with confrontation. I had just moved into my apartment and discovered my upstairs neighbor blasted the volume on his TV late into the night. He was a huge Jennifer Lopez fan, so I was kept awake with the sounds of Selena, Made in Manhattan, and even Geely. But I'm a shy guy, and I don't feel comfortable knocking on his door and telling him to turn it down. Does this sound like you? Well, you're in luck, because now you can confront those loud neighbors without ever having to speak with them. Introducing Yo, turn it down! The app that will alert those rude neighbors to get that volume under control. Just download the app, and when you find yourself in a cacophonous conundrum, point your phone in the direction of the noise, and Yo, turn it down! Will sync with all the devices in their home and send a very clear message. Yo, turn it down! The app will keep sending the message, Yo, turn it down! At increasingly higher volumes until it detects their sound has reached a socially acceptable level. The best part? Yo, turn it down! Is encrypted, so they will never know who is reprimanding their bad behavior. I've had no more sleepless nights listening to The Wedding Planner or Monster-in-Law ever since getting this app. Although, I did enjoy Shall We Dance. That's a good one. Thanks, Yo, turn it down. Don't suffer with inconsiderate neighbors anymore. Download Yo, turn it down! and send a message that cannot be ignored. For a limited time, you will receive a 1-month free trial for Wizard Organizer, the best tip calculating app on the market. Yo, turn it down! Seriously, shut the fuck up. And we're back. There weren't any great extras on the DVDs, but here is the special treat I kind of teased earlier. I found an interview with Samuel Bliss Cooper. Now, he's the actor who plays Daryl, and it was on another Seinfeld podcast. So here's a plug for them. It's called The Place to Be Podcast, and it's available pretty much everywhere. So they had an entire episode where they talked to Samuel Bliss Cooper about his experience filming this episode. So I thought I would just kind of give you some of the highlights because I found it really, really entertaining. Turns out Samuel replaced another actor. So it was a very rushed process to tape his scenes. He actually did all of his scenes in one day with no studio audience. They were clearly catching up because of a recasting situation. He said that he auditioned on a Saturday morning. He was called back on a Sunday to read in front of Jerry and Andy Ackerman, which was really stressful for him. But of course, he got the part and that he was on set on Monday. So it was a very, very fast process. He also mentioned that when he went to audition, there were other guys in the waiting room who were all very clearly black. So he was like, okay, maybe I'm just the token white guy. I don't understand what's happening because the other actors he had seen were darker skinned. It was just very clear that they were of, African descent. So anyway, I thought that was interesting as well. Another thing he said was that the makeup department had made him a couple of shades darker. And when he came to set, Andy Ackerman, the director, was like, no. Take all that shit off his face. We need his normal skin tone. And that's why they hired him, I think. A big reason they hired him. And they put him in that suit and the glasses. I think they wanted him to be looking, very successful. After all, he makes over $100,000 a year. So I'm thinking this is why he didn't say this. He did say it was awkward to be in a suit. He's like, I honestly don't think I'd ever worn a suit in my whole life. I'm a very casual guy. But anyway, I'm thinking that's why this suit is so ill-fitting as well, because they just didn't have time to tailor anything. They're just like, all right, this one fits close enough. Now, when he was asked about his experience with, JLD working with her, he's pretty careful. He says, she was very focused on the filming process. She really wasn't outwardly friendly, but definitely not unfriendly. I think she was very kind of focused. And he also kept saying, listen, this whole thing was a blur. I do have some memories, but partially because of how excited and nervous he was. I mean, this was his first television show he'd ever been on. He'd done a couple commercials, he said, but first show he's ever done, and it's Seinfeld, the #1 show in its finale season. I mean, come on. So he's like, so much of it is a blur because I was so in the mode of being like, don't fuck up, just know your lines, get through these scenes, do your best. And also that they were on such a tight schedule, reshooting all the Daryl scenes. So he kind of gives JLD a pass there. He's like, I think this was probably maybe her second or third time doing all of these scenes. So I don't think she was really in the mood to be friendly. She was just focused, let's get through this. He did mention, though, that Jason Alexander was so friendly, so friendly, and made a point to come over to him, shake his hand, really thank him for stepping in at the last minute. So I thought that was really nice. I wanted to mention that. But then this kind of made me feel better for him. He got invited to the rap party, literally the series rap party, and that he actually almost missed it because he just kept his mail piling up. He's like, I was in my mid-20s. I didn't really keep up on my mail. I just would put it on my coffee table and not really look at it. And one day, it was a Saturday afternoon. He's like, I was kind of tired. Me and my girlfriend at the time had just done a bunch. We'd been hiking. We were just kind of out and about. So I lay down on my couch and I just kind of see this envelope sticking out. And I grab it because it kind of caught my eye. It's this really white cardstock with a New York skyline on it. And then I see it's the invitation to the Seinfeld rap party, and it was happening that night in like a couple of hours. So he called his girlfriend. He's like, oh my God, we got to go to this. We got to go to this. So like she gets dressed up. He's like, yeah, we were able to pull it off. We ended up going, and that he had a fantastic time at that party. And so many people came up to him, including Larry David, and was like very complimentary of his performance and just so appreciative, how he came in and he's like, dude, like I was cast. Like, are you kidding me? He's like, I felt kind of weird that they were all thanking me, but he said it was a really great experience. It was on set, like all the sets, like that's where the party was. And he got to talk to JLD a little bit more there. And it was, obviously she was just in a much better mood. So, but yeah, he had some good memories of that party. Okay, so I want to mention this because I mentioned it earlier, how I've always hated the delivery of they're African. So he mentions that it was Jerry Seinfeld who came up to him and told him to say it exactly like that. Because he said he remembered, he'd done the scene a couple of times. Jerry was laughing. He liked his performance. He's like, hey, just that one line, they're African. He's like, I want you to be a little bit more like they're African, like literally tells him how to say it. Okay, sorry, Samuel. I was blaming you for how much I hated the way that line was said. But turns out it was Jerry Seinfeld wanting the line said in that total dickhead way. Another thing he mentioned was how interracial couples would come up to him after the episode aired and thanked him. Like they really loved it. And they were like, oh, we so appreciate like this issue kind of being, on this big show. And so, yeah, he was like, that would also kind of make him feel awkward considering he's like, I'm just saying the lines they wrote. But at any rate, he's like, it made me feel good. I was really glad that it came across really well and they appreciated it being an interracial couples themselves. And finally, if you were wondering about his ethnicity, he says he doesn't, as far as he knows, have any Black or African heritage, but that this sort of ambiguous look he has did afford him. He doesn't really act very much anymore. He runs like an event company, apparently. But he said that the look really afforded him to play so many ethnically ambiguous characters and that he's of Russian Jewish descent. So if you have some time, just look up his interview on the Place to Be podcast. I just included some of the highlights that I thought were interesting, but it's worth listening to. Okay, now let's open Greg's Sack Lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor, and every week he sends us a sack full of his thoughts. His overall thoughts of The Wizard, he says, this episode is sort of mid-level to me. We get some Benestanza, and this is all I ever want, though there isn't a ton of it. Elaine's story is simple and very Seinfeldian, with not knowing if her boyfriend is Black or not. But I like that we get some interaction with George, which it seems like we've gotten very little of this season. Everything in Florida is just okay to me, so the best parts of this episode are both Elaine and George's plots. Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think Elaine's is the best. I think it's the most interesting, but George's is really funny as well and so brilliant. They're the two back left in New York, so I love that they interact. And like I said, they're the backups for each other when Jerry is out of town, when they need some help, they need some friendly advice. Although, is it very friendly with Benestanza? Probably not. Next in Greg's Sack are his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, one of my favorite Elaine moments of the entire series happens when she tells George that she told the Rosses that he didn't have a place in the Hamptons. And I laughed and I laughed. He's more concerned that the Rosses are lying to him than Elaine just totally blowing up his spot in the most condescending way. Yes, agreed. That's a really good distinction, Greg. He's not really mad at Elaine. He's mad at them for not calling him out on being a liar. It's so interesting. What a funny way to react. And maybe it's just because, he is a master liar. I mean, even though he lies so much, I feel like he's got some pretty high standards and some pretty stringent rules when it comes to, hey, if you can be a liar all you want, but if you have the nerve to let someone go on while they're lying, it's your duty to call them out. Wow. George's strict set of rules when it comes to lying. I think we learned that in this episode. Next, Greg says, everything between Elaine and Daryl is pretty funny in the ways she's using clues to guess if he is in fact black. The scene where she's trying to get him to fill in the warranty form and finds out his income is classic Elaine. She has her own money, but coming off dating the poorest of the poor, a 6-figure income of this clearly way younger man is all working out for her. Exactly. We can't fault our Lainey for, wanting to have someone who's a little more secure and doesn't have to burn chairs for heat. And I'm glad you remembered that as well. We did just come off the Green Lantern. Next, Greg says, one of my least favorite moments is when Elaine says, "I hear you, sister," to the waitress and then says it's okay because she's dating a black guy. While the topic in general is funny, this moment is just pure cringe to me. Why would she say this? Something funnier could have been done here to get Daryl to say he's not black. That's very true. I totally agree. I mentioned it before. It's so cringy. It's like, what are you doing, Elaine? Come on. Because up to that point, they'd been pretty sensitive about the appropriateness of, wondering if he's black. Should you ask? No, you shouldn't ask. Do you really want to know? So they kind of tiptoe around that. And I feel like their attitudes are pretty appropriate in the sense of like, it really doesn't matter ultimately. But then, this moment is just completely out of left field and not really well done. And to your point, Greg, I think they definitely could have figured something else out to have Daryl reveal his true race. I will say the only upside, and it's a big one, is that awesome waitress gets the chance to have that blow line to say, "I'll give you a couple minutes to decide." It's brilliant. It's so great. But maybe we still probably didn't need the "I hear you, sister," and it's okay, my boyfriend's black. We probably still could have achieved her a couple minutes to decide fantastic moment without that. But this is what we got. And we just have to cringe along with everyone else who's cringing at this, which I'm sure is 100% of people. Next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. He says, while we get a little Benestanza, I wanted more of it. There was too much of Kramer in this one for me. I would greatly shrink everything in Florida, even though I love the Seinfelds. I'd have liked George to be a little more involved in Elaine's quest to find out Daryl's background, or even Kramer could be the one using slang or whatever to try and get an answer. I don't care about the Kramer in Florida thing at all. Yeah, the whole campaign and all that stuff, it's not great. And like you, I love the Seinfelds. I feel like they could have maybe milked the whole wizard thing, if it was just Jerry down there and figuring out how to make that funny and just technology with old people. That's always funny. But yes, I totally agree. I feel like, oh God, especially considering what happens down the road with Mr. Michael Richards and black people, that probably wouldn't have aged well if Kramer did have some involvement in that plot and trying to use slang. But it's very Kramer, though. I think like he'd be like, no, I could find out, So there could have been some funny things around that. I appreciate the level, and I appreciate that it's only Elaine doing it. Really trying to find out. Not that it couldn't have been funny with George and Kramer's involvement, like you suggest, Greg. But to me, I think if they tried to push it too much, we could have had more "I hear you, sister" moments. They could have just tipped it too much where it was like, okay, now you guys have fucked it up. So I definitely see your point. I don't disagree about let's get the Florida Kramer shit, just shrink that shit down. I don't know how to fix the Florida plot, but I, like you, was not very enamored with the campaign and puppet regime. Lastly, in Greg's sack are his other thoughts. He says, I noticed all the headlines relating to Larry David playing golf in the Del Boca newspaper. That was a pretty funny touch, wasn't it? I thought that was so cool. I've noticed it before. What a nice little nod, considering he wasn't a part of the show anymore. Greg goes on to say, I forgot how great the Rosses are. Their pure disdain for George makes for such great moments after Susan's death. It was nice to get another full episode of them. Oh my goodness, right? Yeah, what a treat to get the Rosses again and to have them in a role where they're just twisting that knife in George, right? Like just really getting under his skin. It's so delicious, and how much they're enjoying it as well. It is fantastic. I agree. Such a treat to have the Rosses back. And lastly, he says, I would bet that every one of these Del Boca resident extras are dead now. Shivani, how many of them have been on your watch? God damn it. These nameless faces that you knocked off with this podcast. Something to think about. I am going to spend zero time thinking about it, in fact, Greg. And yeah, they're probably all dead, and they probably died way before this podcast. Okay? Okay, except the ones that didn't and that I've already mentioned, because I think Liz Sheridan died during this podcast. I'm not going to go over the list again. It wasn't because of my podcast. It's not a that makes you think moment. It's because they were old and they lived the life they were supposed to live. I'm not going to defend myself. Anyway, thank you, Greg. Despite you blaming me for killing Seinfeld cast members, I still am so thankful every week when you send in your thoughts. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. It has to be that last scene with Daryl. I love the whole scene, but want to go to the Gap? I think it's really well delivered. And a close second is the scene with George. I told them you didn't. And I laughed and I laughed. So good. And then my final notes for the episode. Such a strong plot for Elaine in an episode that's one of the best written episodes, I think, especially in season 9. Really shaping that humor to magnify the tendency to define people and just how that can blow up in your face. That's pretty much what this is about, and I love it. I also like how the thought of being an interracial couple is so exciting for both of them. It's so funny. It's such a great reveal at the end of them both being so disappointed with that line. So we're just a couple of white people. It just speaks to that need of wanting to be different and stand out. A lot of people feel that way. We don't want to be some boring couple. We don't want to be this boring, typical thing. So I just love that element to it as well, that Daryl is even like, oh man, I thought you were Hispanic. So all around, really clever episode that tackles something like race very well. Not easy to do, and it was really ahead of its time. I feel like shows today wouldn't even tackle this. Not in this way, not in this sort of kind of shallow way. They try to be like having a lesson with it all, but no, that's not Seinfeld's way. As we know, no hugging, no learning. And a great performance by JLD. I love the ups and the downs she goes through with Daryl and her inclusion also in George's plot. We get a little bonus there, some Benestanza moments, and blowing George's lie with the Rosses. Perfect for Elaine to do that, of course. So we get laugh acting. We get Benestanza snark. We get Detective Elaine. I gotta say, I feel a little bit spoiled in this episode. There's a lot of JLD magic. And I think that's all I can say about The Wizard. Please be sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me any questions or thoughts, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you have a few minutes, rate and review the podcast. It really does help. I would so appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. Yo, turn it down!